that is joint between myself and Roy Johnston. My part of it's called Succession Planning, Creating Your Future. And I'm Jim Sackman, certified business coach for FocalPoint here in the North. And a couple things you can do. I have you all on mute at the moment. If you want to submit a question or talk to us, there's a chat function under the little bubble at the top of your screen to allow you to send us messages. Feel free to send us a message at any time. Any questions, we'll answer them. And I hope you have a great morning and get something useful out of this presentation. So this is the agenda for my part of the presentation, introduction and goals. What do you want? How to sell a business, and then conclusions, and then I'll hand it across to my good friend Roy. About me, my name is Jim Sackman, former CTO in Petaluma and the general manager at Edgewave. In terms of what I've done in the realm of exits and planning, I've done 6 individual M&A deals, and those are valued from $250K to $1.7 billion. Multiple those with. Okay, I'll turn it up. Thank you. Let me know if that's better. So done 6 M&A deals valued from $250K to $1.7 billion. Angels, VCs, private equity fundings, as well as long-term buyouts. And that's a little bit about my background. Now, I come from FocalPoint, which is started by a guy named Brian Tracy. He's our founder, and he's an author, a lecturer, in particular on sales, organizational development, personal and professional development as well. He's authored over 60 books, has 300 programs you can buy, and does works for over 1,000 companies. So what I would like to, there we go, goals for the seminar. So what I'd like to make sure that we get out of this, because I like to always talk about goals, I'm a business coach, is make sure that everybody understands the business life cycle. And that will be the first topic we talk about. My second goal is to understand the 3 kinds of buyers of a business. And the third one is to understand a bit of the selling process. Now, what I hope is that you've got goals for this webinar, because if you don't, then I'd like you to take a second and think about it as we get started into the main part of the presentation. What would you like to get out of it? So, what do you want from your business? Let's start with, what is your personal strategic plan? You've got to make sure that you've got an idea of what you want for your life. And one of the big things is, your business is a significant part of your assets. Many people own a home. Some people have retirement accounts, regular investment accounts, but you have your business. And as you think about the long term of your life and your net worth, a business is one of your assets. So how you're managing it, how you're thinking about it in terms of its value, how you're growing it, not just from your own use, getting revenue and salary from yourself for it, but a terminal value for it is something that's important as well. So to do that, you have to think about what's your plan. Now, I did work with a startup recently that was going to have a pair of founders, and I asked them what they wanted out of their business, and it turned out that they actually had different views to where they wanted to take the business. And that was important because we needed to resolve it before it started. One in particular wanted the business to only be around for 5 years, and then she wanted to retire, and the other one wanted it to be an ongoing business. So that kind of planning, particular in places where you've got partners involved, is very important. Everybody's got to agree on what's going to happen in the business, what the plan is. When do you want to exit? Now, some people want to build a business and stay in it for 20, 30 years. Other people want to do a business for a period of time and then do something else. Some people would like to build a business, sell it, and retire. But you have to say to yourself, when do I want to do that? Because timing is going to turn out to be very important in your business and what you do with it. So that's really important. And finally, do you have a plan for afterwards? Once you've sold the business, what are you going to do next? I've talked to a gentleman recently who wants to shut down his business next spring, but really he wants to shut it down in semi-retirement. So he wants to find somebody who will pick up the business, and then he can work with the person on a part-time basis to do work with them. So his plan for after is to find a buyer that wants him to continue to work in the business on a part-time basis so that he can get some amount of salary from it. So whether your plan goes for 1 year, 5 years, 25 years, you need to be clear on what you want. So the sigmoid curve, and this is all about the business life cycle. I want to do just a second to bring up quick. Make sure I'm not missing. Okay. So come on, slideshow. There we go. Sigmoid curve, and this is all about the business life cycle. Um, Businesses, just like people, have a defined way they work. They have a learning phase, they have a growth phase, and they have a decline phase. Um, every business goes through this. You can also use this same metric on a product line or a product set, but there is this defined life cycle for a business. There's no escaping it, and then people get trapped in different parts of it. There's a thing called the honeymoon trap at the beginning of a business when you're in the learning phase. Everything is peachy, everything's wonderful, and it's before all the problems set in, and people set extremely high expectations for the business. It's just going to take off like a rocket ship. In standard business terms, everything looks like a hockey stick. It's up and to the right, dramatically to the right, and people get upset with that. There's the 3 feet from the gold trap. When you get near the end of that learning phase, business looks bleak. You're having problems. Everything that can go wrong does go wrong, and you stop. People stop just before they're about to succeed, and it's one of the big problems that people have. One of the reasons people pull out of businesses near the start. There's a thing called founder's trap. This is when you're in the growth phase, and now you're past the point where the business is taking off. You're making enough money uh, to sustain the business, but it stops growing. And one of the reasons it stops growing is the people in charge of the business dominate it. There's no way to continue growing it because essentially you're limited by the founder. As far they micromanage everything. There's no delegation of authority. People don't know what to do. So it's all dependent on the founder, and that limits growth. Then there's a thing called Midas trap. It's also called success trap, which is everything's going great. It can't possibly ever end. You can think of this as like a bubble. Every company that's very successful goes through its equivalent of a bubble phase where things are just exploding. Everything's going right. Nothing can go wrong. Everything's working. Hey, there's no reason to change anything. And finally, there's denial trap. One of my last employers was in denial trap where there was an older product which was having new sales decline every year for 5 years, and every year there was a prediction that the older product was going to increase in sales by 33% the next year. And I kept going, what's changed? Why do we think we do that? So one of the things when you get to the end of that, this is where there's a potential opportunity to redefine the business. So as that product was declining, it was still generating a lot of cash. You could take that cash and use it to do something else, even if it's a next generation of your existing products and services, if it's something adjacent, if it's something new, if there's a replacement product for your existing product. All products eventually end, and you have to do something else. And that's the opportunity phase. And a lot of people don't get that right. So one of the reasons that this is very important is when you're doing your succession planning, when you're doing your planning for exiting the business, you have to say, where am I on the life cycle? where would people want to buy my business and how would they want to buy it? And there's a couple of reasons for that. You really want to be selling in the growth phase so that people see the maximum opportunity, and people are going to be troubled if you're caught in founder's trap, because then you're inexorably tied to the business. And how are they going to remove you from the business and still have it successful? So it's something to think about as you're selling your business. So again, importantly, where are you, your staff, and your business on this curve? So there are three kinds of buyers in the world, and the first of them is called a strategic buyer. In larger companies, you can think of it as somebody buying their competitor or buying into a market. They buy into an adjacent market. Very typical when you hear the large M&A deals in Wall Street. These are the kind of buyers you're talking about. They're strategic buyers. They want to buy the company for some purpose. There's some value that they get out of the company that they couldn't get on doing it on their own. So when when a strategic buyer comes in and buys your company, they're generally paying above fair market value. That means there's this thing, tangible asset that they're buying, momentum, brand, market, something that they want out of the company they couldn't get some other way. Very typical for it to take 18 to 36 months to sell a business to its strategic buyer, partly for positioning reasons, partly because you're going to ask more money than the business is worth on paper, and so you need to convince somebody of the strategic value of the business. And with all of these, you can have as much or as little involvement afterwards as you want. The second kind is entrepreneurial, and those come in at fair market value. They're pretty typically a shorter sales cycle, and they can have 0 to lots of seller involvement. This is typical of selling something to either an individual that wants to get into your business. It's also when you sell to employees or family business. So when you want to turn a business over from one generation to the next, that's an entrepreneurial sale. They don't have a strategic reason to enter your business other than to continue it. So generally that's sold at fair market value. And finally, there are opportunistic. Opportunistic buyers pay as little as they can get away with, zero if possible. You say, well, why would anybody sell anything for zero? I remember one of my old employers, a company called Raykel Datacom. I went through and calculated off the agreement. They actually sold the business for minus $200 million. They actually paid $200 million for somebody to take that business off their hands. And the reason was the cost of shutting it down, they thought was going to be more than it was worth, so they wanted to get rid of it. If you're willing to take no money, you can do it very quickly. And again, you can do this with as much or as little as you want. Now, the question for yourself is, which of these models do you want to follow for yourself? Most people want to maximize their value, so they want a strategic buyer. Some people want to continue a family business or want to sell to their employees. They're okay with an entrepreneurial buyer. Opportunistic buyers are somebody abandoning a business, and generally they get nothing out of it. So if you're selling to a strategic, you get an A+. You sell to an entrepreneurial, you get a B+. And of course, an opportunistic buyer is a fail. And which type of buyer is your business positioned for? You can see, if you think back to our life cycle, companies that are in the growth phase of their business, particularly those that are near the top of that, are really well set up for strategic buyers. There's momentum in the business. It's doing very well. It's making good money. People want to buy it. Entrepreneurial can be bought in any of the life cycle phases, and opportunistics are usually sold in the declining phase once things start going bad. I remember talking to a CEO in the past, and he said, what's the best way to sell a business? And I said to him, have a good business. So if you've got a good business and it's making money, people will be interested in you. Now, from a strategic standpoint, let me add in that you want to have something that is of value to your competitors. or of your potential customers. So when you're selling your business, you need to treat it like any other sales transaction. Know who your buyers are and what they're interested in, what their need is. So what's the process like? So let's start off with, how do you market and sell a business? First off, you need to understand, going back to that last chart, what kind of buyer you want. What will be their buying process, and how will you put a price on that business? So if you think about that second line, what will be their buying process? When I've sold businesses to strategic buyers, we had to know what was important in our business that they were willing to pay money for. And I'll use my example of when I worked at AFC, we sold a lot of equipment to small telephone companies and made really good money at it, and nobody cared. What they cared about was traction and business with the large telephone companies. And so for us to sell that business, and we'd reached the conclusion that we needed to sell the business, we had to transform our market from small telephone companies to large telephone companies. That took us 4 years to do that, but that was the journey we had to go through to be able to sell our business to a strategic buyer. So when you look at what your buyer wants, you have to say, what could they want in my business? What is the value to them? What are they interested in? Not what you're interested in, not what's good for you, but what could be of value to them, because that's where they're going to pay above fair market value. Putting a price on your business is kind of interesting as well, because one of the things you should consider is, should you hire a business transaction advisor? Getting a formal valuation for your business. There are some business brokers that will give you kind of a back of the napkin kind of number, but the value in your business will include things like your physical assets, your accounts receivable, all the financials, and you need to know how to value your business. In the real world of large scale business sales, things like comparable transactions, what multiples of various metrics there are. What's your multiple of sale for that kind of a business? So if you're in the trades and you're a construction company, what was the last 5 construction companies of about your size sold for in comparison to their numbers? Those are very important metrics, and the transaction advisor may know that. Couple things. If you're considering it, and I almost always recommend bringing in a professional advisor, because it takes time to sell a business. You've got to have a presentation, you've got to have everything put together, and that takes time. And do you have the time? If you're a small business owner, you may not. When I sent John Schofield back when I was at AFC around to 7 different companies, just to have dinner with the CEOs so that we could understand whether they were even interested in buying the company. So all of that, he had to travel. Some of it was international, took time. Do you have the time to do it? Second, do you have the patience? None of these things run in a straight line. Like any other business deal, they have ups and downs, ins and outs, and can be filled with potholes along the way. So it takes patience, time and patience. And do you understand the market? Again, back to things like valuation and what's important. An outside advisor can tell you what's important to your potential buyers and how they're going to measure your business. Because one of the big challenges is, this is going to be one of the single largest transactions in your business. So whenever that happens, it's going to be an emotional decision. It's going to be emotional for you to sell your business. So like all investments, you need to lose the emotion. One of the problems in investing today that I see in particular is that people do buy high, sell low, because they buy stock when it's at its peak because they think it's doing well. And then when it declines, they sell it immediately. So instead of buy low, sell high, they do buy high, sell low. So this is an emotional time. It's an emotional transaction. You want to remove the emotion from it. An outside advisor, of course, has no attachment to your business, so they can give you a much more level-headed view. It's something to consider when you're going through and selling a business. So what kind of, how is your business valued? Well, there's tangible assets. Do you have a building? Do you have equipment? Do you have cash on hand? Uh, all those things are tangible assets. They can be, put on a balance sheet with a CPA, and you can come up with a number. Uh, if you look at a company, a large public company, it'll be a term called book value. That's really going to be their physical, what the business is physically worth, what they have in inventory, all that stuff. The second thing is cash flow analysis. So people are going to take a linear look at your business and say, if business continues exactly as it is going forward, how much money are you going to make? And this, of course, assumes that business is flat and level and linear, which businesses are never flat, level, and linear, and it's where one of the arguments are going to come in. Hard to argue about intangible assets, much easier to argue about cash flow. They're gonna assign a thing called a discounted cash flow, which is going to take into account inflation and the cost of capital and all that kind of stuff, and then assign a terminal value, and then they're going to want to add that to the tangible assets of your business, and say that's what the business is actually worth. You're worth what your physical assets are plus the value of your cash flow. That would be fair market value for a business. Intangible assets are intellectual property, value of strategic relationships, all those kind of things that what your brand is worth, things that you can actually put a number on, or you can really argue about a number now. And so when you see people doing large write-offs on Wall Street, a lot of times they're writing down intangible assets, something that doesn't really matter. Nobody paid any cash for it, but they put billions on a balance sheet to balance the cost of a transaction, because when they bought a business, it was much above the book value of the business plus the cash flow. So they counted that as the intangible assets, and then they write them off later, and they lose billions. Nothing actually happened. So those are called impaired assets when you do that, and it's a big argument in Wall Street. But people will pay when you go to getting over fair market value. It's those intangible assets which people are paying for, and then finally you. So when we talked about how much involvement you personally are going to have post the transaction, then you've got to say to yourself, if it's none, then people are going to say, okay, so if I subtract you from the business, what do I have left? And if you're willing to have some involvement or a lot of involvement, like the friend of mine who's thinking about closing his business down next spring, then of course there's ongoing value to having you in the business, and it's actually worth it. So strategic buyers and entrepreneurial buyers do value intangible assets. Opportunistic buyers don't. So that's one of the reasons you can get more money out of the right kind of buyer. So how do you make it easy to buy? One, you need to have a professional presentation of your business, which is not it's partly a marketing pitch, partly a sales pitch, but it contains some amount of information that you would want to have if you were buying the business, so you know how it was structured, how its customer base was, what products were sold, what was important of all of that. Have all your documentation available. People are going to want financials, so have them available. They'll love to have them audited. That costs money, but people would love to have audited financials. So expect them to ask for it, and that'll be one of the deal conditions potentially, depending on the size of the deal. They don't. There will be a frauds note in the transaction document, but if you have audited financials, it'll be hard to say you're fraudulent about your representations within the financial part of your business. Have a clean structure. If it's commingled businesses all over the place, it makes it very hard. I spent 6 weeks on a very simple asset transaction once because we had commingled intellectual property with other businesses. Made it very complicated to undo. Have all your legal and financial challenges resolved. I know of one deal that went off because there was a potential didn't happen because of a potential patent lawsuit between the company that was going to get purchased and a third party. Everybody thought the third party was nuts, but they were unwilling to do the transaction until it was clear, and eventually didn't didn't happen because it took too long. And then have your ask and your walk away clear. You're going to go in with asking for more money than you're going to expect to get. That's true in every transaction. And you have to say, if they don't offer this amount, I'm going to walk away. And just remember, the simpler and cleaner transaction it is, the less it'll cost and the less the chance of problems. Uh, just that simple. Finally, an outright sale is not the only option. You can sell the businesses to employees through employee stock ownership. There are leverage sales with earnouts, which means you can actually loan the buyer money to buy it from you and then have them pay you interest and earnouts based on the performance of the business. You can also do joint ventures and partnerships, which allow people to buy into the business and then take it over time. So there's lots of structures that are ways to get there from here. You've got a lot of options. Be clear on what you want. Talk to experts about your path forward if you don't want to do a pure outright sale, because there are ways of dealing with it. So, conclusions and Q&A, if I can. Number one, always number one in a business coach's mind, be clear on what you want. Know where you are on the business life cycle. Know your buyers. Know your price. And execute the deal. And if you have any questions for me, you can type them in now. Other than that, I'm going to hand it across to Roy Johnston of Johnston Thomas, a set of attorneys at law.
Great. Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to share the microphone and technology with you this morning. I'm going to especially thank Jim for get this set up. Put over to my side of slides. So I'll be talking about the legal considerations for business succession planning. And before everyone goes to sleep, let you know that this is a very high-level presentation. It's not going to get down into individual clauses or phrases, so you can relax. But there are very important legal considerations when you're thinking about selling your business that we'll cover briefly in the time we have this morning. I call it the plan, protect, and prosper points to cover, and so we'll get started with the agenda. A little bit about myself. I'll talk about that. We'll talk about the types of business succession. We'll talk about the 3 Ps, which is the planning, the protection, and the prospering phase of business transactions. And we're going to talk about the team that you need to assemble to handle the transaction, and then we'll have time for questions. A little bit about me. I've been an attorney for 18 years. Our firm practices in the area of business transactions, business formation, business contracts, estate planning, and real estate. And we do both transactional as well as litigation. I have a partner, Ryan Thomas, who handles most of the litigation for the firm. I'm a member of the California State Bar Business Section, the Sonoma County Bar Association Business Section, and I'm a SCORE presenter, do seminars throughout the year for SCORE. SCORE is the Service Corps of Retired Executives who helps either startups or businesses that want to take their business to the next level and making presentations. A little bit about me personally. Married to my wife Barbara. We have 8 grandchildren and one very spoiled Bichon Frise. And I enjoy cycling and sailing in the beautiful Northern California area. So talking about the types of business succession, there is, of course, the outside sale. And most of this presentation with Jim and me this morning deals with selling to an outsider. But there are inside sales that can take place. And we'll talk about those. Leadership transfer on retirement. Retirement planning is an important transition planning that will take place. We even have businesses that are going to close down, and that is a type of business succession and needs to be planned to limit your liability as you go forward after you close your business. And then, of course, there's the unexpected business succession. It comes with perhaps the principal's incapacity or death. If if there's not a plan in place to manage that business succession when the unexpected occurs, it can be catastrophic to the business. Okay, now talking about the three P's of business succession. First is the planning process. So why do we want to plan? Jim has covered a lot of this, but when I see my clients preparing for this, they're oftentimes too busy to sit down and actually take time. They're so busy working in their business that they're not working on how to get out of their business. And so when we force a plan with a team of experts, this helps encourage them to put their daily busyness, spelled correctly, on hold so that they can work with their experts to focus on the end game. Allows them to prepare for an unexpected succession event. That incapacity could even be divorce, death, anything that would have caused a major disruption in the business, part of the planning process. And it provides stability among key employees. Your key employees know that there's a succession plan in place or at least in progress will be an attraction to encourage them to stay and be a part of your business. And it gives a sense of security to your spouse and your family as you contemplate making a change. To know that your family will be comforted to know that there is a progressive plan to make this happen to maximize the value out of the business. And succession planning is an essential component of business disaster planning. Part of disaster planning that we assist our clients with is, of course, the environmental disaster plans, but it also involves key employees leaving and, of course, the principal themselves if they're retiring or leaving the business or unexpectedly have a problem as well. And it ensures continuing business growth. The overall objective of having an exit plan is so that you know how you're going to grow your business, where you're going to take your business to the next step so that you can begin to package it for sale or transition into the succession. And we're going to talk about the legal considerations for planning. First of all, we want to document our expectations. Those include the principal themselves and the spouse and their family. What do they expect out of the business? Where do they want to go with it? Key employees. If you have key employees that make your business successful, you want to document what their expectations are. Are they going to stay with you? I have an employee in my law firm who she swears that the moment I retire, she's retiring. So that's important because she's a very key employee to this law firm, and it's important to know that she's actually a part of the succession plan. And then the potential purchaser. What is the expectations of the potential purchaser? They usually supply those expectations, but it's our job to anticipate their expectations and position our company in a position to meet those needs of that potential purchaser. Look at the best business structure for a succession plan. You may currently be a sole proprietorship or even a partnership or even a corporation or LLC. Those may be right for the business succession plan, or they may not be. So we want to look at what your current business structure is and perhaps change it in light of the succession plan. If we're doing a cash sale of either the assets or the business, well, it may not be that critical on what type of business structure you are. But if we're doing a sequential succession, what that is a type of business where someone is buying a part of your business over time. That could be through an employee stock ownership plan. It could be a transition buyout of key employees. A sale in which there's a progressive purchase of your business. Oftentimes, those are easier to do if you actually have a corporation with shares or a member LLC with shares so that you can transfer shares over to the buyer over a period of time rather than pieces of assets from the company. And then an installment sale. If you're going to sell your business on an installment type note plan for a longer period of time, the easier to collateralize an actual corporation or an LLC versus collateralizing the actual assets themselves and to take back over that LLC or that corporation if the installment sale fails. You want to formalize your business operations, document your policies and procedures, protect your intellectual property, transfer your knowledge and expertise into a operations plans, policies and procedures. You want to audit your current legal status. Uh, we start with the Articles of Incorporation and Organization with the Secretary of State. See what it starts with there. That's like your constitution. We look at the bylaws or operating agreement if you're a corporation or an LLC, or partnership agreement if you're a partnership. Look at the buy-sell agreements. There may be already in place a buyout agreement among the shareholders or LLC members. If someone wants out of the business, what is the procedures by which the remaining LLC members or the shareholder stockholders can buy out that member's shares? And then there's intellectual property protection. We want to see what intellectual property you have in your business and what steps you've taken to protect it, and how that intellectual property is going to be transferred and how it's going to be protected during that purchase process. And then customer client contracts. What are ongoing obligations that you have with your contracts with your clients, so that when the business transfers, are those obligations going to transfer over to the new buyer? Then we also look at your accounts receivable. Can we collect that accounts receivable? And we convert that into cash so it makes your business more attractive to potential buyers. We look at the use permit for where your business is located, making sure that's in place. There's city licenses, making sure that your business is properly licensed in the cities in which it does business. By the way, that's a often overlooked area that businesses don't do that. We look at your business and professional licenses, being sure that either those business licenses can transfer to a buyer, or if there are professional licenses, does that buyer qualify with their own professional licenses to be able to purchase your business? We look at employment contracts. The employment contracts may terminate upon sale of the business. They may be with you personally. If they're with the business, that may depend upon the type of business that you have. And so we want to see if we want to extend these contracts with our key employees before we actually put the business up for sale. And then the employee policies and procedures need to be documented, need to be put in place of our key procedures by which we run our business and work with our clients and customers. Those procedures need to be documented and put in writing so that when it's transferred over to the new buyer, those procedures will remain in place. And then an employee handbook. We always evaluate the employee handbook to be sure that it's up to date, and that there are no liabilities that may transfer over to the new owners for failing to adhere to the employee rules and regulations of the state of California, in the case of California companies. We look at the obligations of the business. These obligations could be premises leases, or you may own your business, but you may have a mortgage on your property. So we want to make sure that you can actually transfer your lease or transfer your mortgage to the new buyer. If you're a franchise, we haven't talked much about franchises, but that's a whole other class of issues that arise. And we will have to go back to your franchisor and get permission to transfer the franchise license. They also need to qualify with the franchisor, and always a concern for the seller is any ongoing obligations that they might have to the franchisor even after they sell the business. And then lender financing. Lender financing could be like in the terms of a mortgage. It could also be an SBA loan. It could be private financing. It could also be financing from key employees, or even partners may have financed the business. And all of those need to be looked at in terms of their transferability to the new buyer, if possible. And the vendor contracts. We may have long-term contracts with vendors that need to be transferred over to the buyer. Vendors may or may not be willing to transfer those, and so those need to be examined. Customer client obligations, we talked about this a little bit, but if you have ongoing obligations to your clients over a period of time, looking at those obligations and being sure that we've addressed those as part of the transition. Okay, evaluating during the planning process, we want to evaluate the legal ramification of succession options. So You'll be presented probably with several different options on how a business is sold, is transferred. Each one of those has legal implications, and so it's a job of the attorney to evaluate those and to advise you on what those implications would be. Oftentimes, the interim agreements are reached as part of the sales process. We want to document those, that the non-binding portion of those, document that those are truly non-binding until certain points in the sales process in which successive obligations may become binding over a period of time as the business purchase procedures take place. And then collateral obligations. These are obligations that arise out of the implications of the sale of business. We've talked about some of these in which you may have ongoing obligations that are created from clients, your obligations to your clients or to a franchisor, to lenders. Those are obligations that all need to be looked at in terms of the type of business succession plan that we're planning to put in place. If it's a business sale or to outside investors, we need to be sure that they've signed a non-disclosure agreement. That is an extremely important part of the process from the very, very beginning. And the real tricky part is that there's a series of disclosures that will be put in place over time. So when you first have someone who's kicking the tires of a business, the type of information that you disclose to them is going to be very high level. And if something goes awry in that process, that it will not cause you to impact your business over time. As the interest by the buyer grows and they become more and more committed to buying your business, then you can release more and more detailed information that could be sensitive if it fell into the wrong hands. So that disclosure staging is very important to map that out. And then the final documents, the final sales documents, a good transactional attorney will always strive for a win-win situation. It does no good for either the buyer or the seller to have a complete win and the other side have a complete loss. That's actually a lawsuit in the making. It's important that both parties sense that they've won something, they've come away with it. The buyers received good value in the business, and the sellers received good compensation for the sale. We may want to include periodic reviews and adjustments in the sales process, particularly if there's a workout process in which the selling principal is going to stay active in the business. There may be a series of periodic reviews and even adjustments in the sale contract. I always recommend a mediation clause as part of my contracts. That way that if there is a dispute that arises between the parties, that before it proceeds to arbitration or a lawsuit, that there's a mediation in which they submit the dispute to a qualified mediator and see if they can work out any differences without having to go on further into litigation, arbitration. And then consider a binding arbitration clause. This actually is not an automatic thing, but needs to be talked about. Arbitration is a private trial done in typically a lawyer's office with a hired arbitrator paid by both parties, so he's neutral. And that arbitrator hears the case. It's binding. The arbitrator will make an award. That award will be binding on the parties and can be enforced as a binding judgment in court if necessary. Generally faster, oftentimes as cheap as a court trial, and it keeps it out of the public eye. So protecting the plan, we want to make sure that the document is in detail, completely documented, no surprises. We want to make sure that we review and amend it on a regular basis as needed, that we look at the bylaws and operating agreement, the buy-sell agreements, any franchise agreements, the premises lease, employment contracts. All of those are carefully documented and reviewed and possibly revised as part of the process. And then the prosper phase, it's monitoring business performance. We want to set up metrics that call for performance, especially if the payments or workout provisions are included. What are those performance standards and how are they monitored? Monitor the legal rights and responsibilities. Important if you have any kind of a tail liability as a seller, that you monitor how that buyer is transacting their business, so that you don't have a liability that inures to you as a seller, even several years after the business transaction takes place. And then a periodic review of the succession plan until it's completed. So oftentimes succession plans are not a single event, but over time, and monitoring that is very important. And oftentimes negotiations for adjustments are needed, and those are all things that need to take place to be sure that you actually get the value that you planned when you sold your. Now, it takes a team. A team consists of an internal team and external teams. Internally, of course, are the owners, just as important in a small business, are the spouses of the owners. That oftentimes they need to be a part of this team to see how that process takes place. The spouses in some way may be actually active in the business, some extent or the other, and need to be part of that team. The management team is going to manage the business, and particularly in the transition period, they're going to be the bridge between the outgoing owner and the new owner coming in. And then other key employees. You may have some disclosures and some participation by some of your most key employees of your business that are part of that internal team. Your external team consists of a business consultant, such as Jim Sackman, guide the process from the very beginning, starting with a personal strategic plan, assisting or even farming out the valuation of the business, positioning your business for sale, and assisting with the sales process. A personal coach may be needed. That's a personal coach that comes alongside you and maybe other key owners of the business. There's always the challenge of letting go of your baby that perhaps you created in the nursed stages, and that often takes a personal coach to help you with that challenge. To look beyond the scale of the business and look at what's next in your life. The personal coach can help you manage the employees and the entire staff, and help you deal with any conflicts that might arise out of that. Help negotiation challenge inevitably arises in a more complex business transaction. There's going to be negotiations that take place that may affect how you feel about your business, and how you feel about you. Having a personal coach can help with that. Can help you revise your expectations as you start out with very high expectations or a high dollar amount for your business. That may be moderated over time with negotiations, and a personal coach can help you deal with those and help you assimilate those. And then ongoing review and revising of your post-sale plans and goals. So that a personal coach can work with you long after the sale has taken place to help you transition into the next phase of your life. Next member of the team would be a financial advisor. Financial advisor would help with post-succession planning. Where are you going? What are you going to do when these funds come in? Help you with your budget. Help you with making plans for vacation and travel after you sell your business. May help you with planning your next career in terms of what that cost is going to be and what the benefit might be. And help you with retirement planning. How to turn those dollars into a stream of income as you retire. Certified public accountant is definitely necessary to help review and improve the existing financial statements and the condition of your company, to review your personal finances and how that'll be affected by the sale of the business, to analyze succession options. So as your various options, this is a way your CPA can help put numbers to those options. The CPA can help develop tax strategies for sale. There are ways to minimize taxes, and that's always a goal that we want to do each step of the way. It can help evaluate the structure of the offers. Another member of the team is your insurance agent. The new owner, key employee, you may actually have an insurable interest in that new owner or key employees even after you leave the business, particularly if you're going to have an installment sale or ongoing payments coming out of the business. That may include disability insurance and life insurance. You may have post-sale liability exposure. There are statutes of limitations that continue to run even after you sell your business that may affect you personally, and you may want to continue to maintain insurance to protect yourself from any liability that arose prior to the sale of the business. That includes contractual obligations, any personal liability, products liability, employee claims, and liability that arises out of that. And finally, an attorney, of course. Attorney helps you review your business structure and documents, optimizes your business structure for sale, ensure the operations and employment law compliance, helps with accounts receivable collection, drafting sales succession documents, monitoring contract performance. And with that, we'll have a few minutes for questions for either Jim or me, and we'd be happy to entertain those at the time. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, you can just go ahead and speak, and the group will hear the questions.
Yeah, hi, Roy. This is Bob Duffield. How are you doing?
Hi, Bob. Nice to hear from you.
Great. Boy, I have to tell you, questions. I have probably about 100 questions. What you just went over was a huge mouthful of succession planning, so thank you very much for sharing your insight and wisdom about that, by the way.
I appreciate that, Bob. And it is it's a huge topic. It could go on for days.
I could see that, and I appreciate your knowledge about it as well. So if someone's wanting to sell a business, where's the first place they ought to start thinking about that and planning that process?
Oh, can you repeat that, Bob? Roy handed me the headphones.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So if an individual is wanting to sell their business, what's the very first step they ought to take in order to begin that whole planning process?
Okay, probably the very first thing they ought to do is, depends on their existing team, but I'm going to make an assumption that they've got an attorney and a CPA. My assumption, the first thing I would do is actually go talk to my attorney to make sure that they probably have recommendations of people they work with in the area of business sales and business transactions, and it'll help make it much more seamless if it's a group of people that work together on a regular basis. So that would be the very first thing I do. And if I back up from that and say, the question should be is, as somebody starting to plan a sale, they need to be thinking back to, if you remember my part of the 3 buyers, what kind of sale they're interested in and what they want out of it, because that'll be some of the very first kind of questions that an attorney, a business or anybody that gets involved in this will ask is, what are you trying to achieve? Because there is going to be lead time in almost every case between when you think about starting to sell and when you actually sell. Roy and I are in an B&I group, and I know of 3 people in the group that have end dates in mind. One is far out already as 2020 of when they're expecting to sell their business.
Right. Okay.
There any other
great.
Well, if not, I'd like to thank everybody for coming and listening in, and we'll be getting a link out to you for this recording later today, and I'll be posting it on YouTube eventually, and you can share it with others if you want. And I'd like to thank you guys for your time, and I hope you all have a great day.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was great.
Corey doesn't